the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. And today I am lucky enough to be with Zachary C. Solomon. Zachary, could you give me, how about us, a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
Absolutely. Thanks, Alison. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you having me on. I'm Zachary, and I'm a writer. I live in New York's Hudson Valley. I'm originally from Miami, Florida. And so I'm a bit of a long way from home, especially right now as I'm in my office with the space heater on and my big sweater on. I'm a novelist, and I'm here talking to you about my debut novel, A Brutal Design, which is the first book that I've been lucky enough to sell. And it's actually the third novel that I've written. What else can I tell you? I've lived in the Northeast since I left for college when I was 18 years old, and I have a lovely, ridiculous 2.5-year-old daughter, and I have a son who is due to be born sometime between now and the next 2 weeks. So we're at the precipice, you could say. Yeah, that's the elevator pitch of myself.
Well, I was born in December, so I'm a Christmas baby, but I was early, so I was premature, and my dad always called me his little tax deduction. So if the baby comes before New Year's, you have your tax deduction. If not, you got to wait till next year.
Right.
So tell me, Brutal Design, what is the title about? What's the novel about?
Sure, yeah. So the title, it's a sort of play on words. Brutal, that word brutal is doing kind of double work. The most sort of available definition of brutal, something very difficult, intense, and that has to do essentially with the plot of the novel, with the themes of the novel, which is a tough set of themes. It's a tough novel, I think. It's about a lot of things, but it's essentially about fascism and how fascism can masquerade as a kind of modernism or as a kind of humanism, even in some ways, and that the people who wield fascism as a tool or as a weapon often do so under the guise of a promise that this is actually what we all want, and that what we all need, and that this will make things better. And so that's a big theme of the book. And then the other side of the meaning there for brutal is it's a direct reference to the architectural style of brutalism, which is a kind of it sort of decorates the novel. This is a novel about architecture in a lot of ways. My protagonist, Zelnick, is an architecture. He's a postgrad. He's a graduate student, and he's essentially recruited by this experimental socialist city that wants to be a utopia, a kind of workers' paradise. And they're looking for an architect, and he kind of gets this mysterious call, while at the same time discovering in a sort of mysterious fashion that this is potentially, this place, Duma, is potentially where his uncle has fled to, and his uncle raised him following the death of his parents, and so he wants to find his uncle, who has sort of vanished mysteriously. And so this kind of double promise of being able to design buildings, which is what he wants to do, and also finding his uncle, kind of drags him away from his town, in some ways against his wishes, in some ways in response to his wishes. And so Zelnick, he goes to Duma, and he hopes to be able to design buildings there, and he encounters brutalism there. It's a style that he's only vaguely familiar with, but he's enchanted by it, and he's overwhelmed by it. Brutalism, for those who don't know, is an architectural style that was born kind of out of necessity following World War II, when so much of Europe had been destroyed by bombs, and there was a shortage of building materials, and so modernist architects kind of stepped up with this challenge, or faced this challenge. How do we design low-cost, social housing projects for thousands, tens of thousands of people who have been displaced by the war cheaply. And so they had concrete available, unrefined concrete available. And so these buildings, which are they still kind of pepper the world. They are, by most accounts, hideous. People overwhelmingly hate them. In fact, there's even been legislation passed against them, or in some cases to tear them down. In some cases, in opposition to them. Beautification laws in a way. But anyway, these buildings sprung up all over Europe. And also they do exist in the United States as well. So anyway, this style, this brutalism is it's a big part of my novel. It decorates the novel. It's a direct player in the plot of the novel. And so that's the title of the book. I'll just add one last thing, which is that the title that I had for the book actually initially was just Zelnik, which is the name of the protagonist, because I love that name and I thought it'd be a nice title. But I also really like a brutal design too.
So I had not heard of the actual style, brutal design. It is fascinating. And I'm imagining those aerial views that I see when you take the little drone tour of cities of Europe when your computer turns on and it's got the little pictures that come up. And so is it kind of like tenements made out of cinder blocks?
In a sense, I would say that the difference is, or one of the defining characteristics of brutalist buildings, and this certainly isn't true of all of them, but a lot of them, is that there was a philosophy, a socialist philosophy that informed this building. And so, in addition to being kind of cheaply made, they also were these buildings are representative of modernist ideals of socialism, of humanism, of equality. And so the idea is that people could live in these buildings affordably. And in some cases, they could have everything that they needed within these buildings. And there are some brutalist buildings that have shopping malls built into them, and kindergartens built into them, and gardens and parks, and places where people could both live and work and go to the clinic and have their kids educated and have daycare and so forth. And so it's more than just kind of a tenement building, but in some ways, since the heyday of brutalism, these buildings have become, in so many cases, totally decayed. Concrete, it turns out, is not a terrific material. It gets weather stained. It gets the exposed beams get rusted and it looks bad. And so in addition to being this kind of failed promise architectural style, which of course makes people feel gross and disappoints them when they see these buildings, they also physically don't look great anymore. And so in some ways they are right, like what you're referring to, these kinds of tenement buildings. But there's so much sadness too. There's a decay, there's a sadness, there's a sense of failed promise in them too.
All right, so I can see this as a backdrop for a fantastic visual for a novel. So did you visit a lot of these places in order to be able to write about it with such daftness?
Well, obviously I wrote a book about it. I've always been drawn to the style, kind of an approach avoidance sort of relationship. So I was kind of lucky enough, or I don't know if it was luck or if this fact kind of informed the writing of the novel, but I wound up writing this book over the course of a year in Columbus, Ohio. We wound up moving there. My wife and I, we were living in Brooklyn. We met in Brooklyn. We had lived there for 7, 8, 9 years. And my wife got a teaching job in Ohio, and so we just up and moved and found ourselves in the Midwest, which neither of us had ever explored or spent any time in, really. And I was working on this book mostly in libraries around Columbus, but I discovered this building called the Ohio History Center, I think it's called. And I discovered that there was an archive in there where I could write, and this building is just one of these sort of picture postcard examples of brutalist architecture. I mean, it's just utterly hideous, and it's massive and blocky, and it looks like this concrete mushroom, and most people would look at it and just be totally sort of turned off by it. But I, for whatever reason, was deeply attracted to it, and I loved going inside, and I loved the massive vaulted ceilings and the concrete and the iciness of it. It was a totally unwelcoming place. And being in that space really helped me kind of access the I don't know, the strangeness, the uncanniness of brutalist style, which to me, the kind of irreconcilability with this architecture between, on one hand, its promise for equality, and on the other hand, its total unwelcoming quality. It's cold, it's airy, it's anonymous, it's rejecting kind of. That sort of weird intersection of opposing feelings really helped me write this novel. It made me kind of it helped me kind of embody that strangeness, which I love. I love that feeling of strangeness, and I want people who read my book to feel that strangeness. So it was really helpful.
Tell me about the writing journey. So you developed the idea and then you just sat down and wrote it out, or what was your process?
Yeah. I actually the germ of this novel came from an essay that was written in the New York Times in 2019, called Utopia Abandoned. And it was written by a writer named Nikhil Saval, who is like an N+1 guy who actually, amazingly, has, since he published this book, become a Pennsylvania state senator. And he's an amazing person. And this essay is about the Italian town of Ivrea, which was at one point in the mid-century essentially taken over by the Italian manufacturing company Olivetti, which you might know as a typewriter company. They did some really incredible typewriter designs. And I was so taken with this story of Olivetti's creation of a company town in Ivrea, basically a place where the factories would be, but also where the company would create the housing for the workers and have everything that a person would need to start a family and also have a job. And so there would be free daycare, and there would be a full 10 months of maternity leave for expecting mothers, which is just extraordinary. And workers would have their own sort of private farms, which they would have time off to tend, and there was everything there. You could do music classes and art classes, and there was a whole universe in this town, that was kind of centered on the job, on the factory. And I loved that idea so much. I've always been attracted to the idea of a company town. There's something really creepy to me about that, about your job also dictating where you live and how you live and what you can afford. There are some examples of company towns in which workers were paid with in a currency that they could only use in that town, which feels like a prison, basically. And I found that idea both enchanting and also really horrifying, kind of repelling to me, or repellent to me, I mean. And then of course the end of this essay, or the takeaway, is also like, well, why didn't this work? Like Ivrea it's not an abandoned town, but Olivetti's not there, and so many of these extraordinary buildings that were built, and many in the brutalist style, are abandoned. So like, what happened? This is such a beautiful idea, that was carried out, with I think the right the right intentions, to make a better world. So like, where did it go wrong? And so I just had a lot of fun thinking about that, like, a company town essentially designed with the best intentions. Like, how does it fail? Why does it fail? What are the things that have to go wrong? What are the what kind of flavor of greed or corruption or even outright malevolence needs to be present for this sort of thing to just totally tank.
All right, so my day job, I'm a professor of composition, literature, and
Oh.
other writing type of things. However, I'm like, oh, this could be a really fun research paper. Studying that, and
Yeah,
I like all these topics are floating through my brain right now. I'm like, wow, they
I
could
love
really
it.
grab onto that, and I would love to see where students would take that philosophy. But um, so Zachary, it sounds like, as a first-time novelist, you got the gem of the idea, you sat down, you sat in the space, and you really sort of enveloped a life around your work. So then you sent it off to publishing. So tell me about that journey.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I love that you're a comp professor. I taught comp for 6 years. I loved it. I just loved it, and I loved my students, and I miss it all the time. So I think that's great. Uh, yeah, gosh, the journey was long and arduous and exhausting and full of despair. And A Brutal Design is actually the third novel that I've written, but it's the first one that I've been fortunate enough to sell. First one that got me an agent. Um, I wrote two novels before this one. Over the last, these three novels have been written over the last decade of my life. Um, and I love my first book. I have a more complicated relationship with my second book, which was like my attempt to write something that was more mainstream. And as a result of that, I think I couldn't do it. I failed. I think I wrote some weird hybrid of like highbrow and also, kind of upstream literary commercial fiction, whatever. I don't whatever you want to call it. And it just was bad. It was a bad book. But anyway, um, and so this book in some ways felt like, I don't know. I don't want to sound too fatalistic, but it felt in some ways like my last chance. I didn't think going into this book that I would have it in me to write a fourth book. Um, I just didn't I couldn't I couldn't conceptualize of where I would get the energy or hope from had this one failed to get an agent, to get me an agent, or to get me a book deal. Thankfully that's a moot point. I was able to get an agent. I have an absolutely terrific agent. His name is Reeves Hamilton at the Vertical Ink Agency, and he is a he's a brilliant reader, and he's a weirdo just like me, and he has strange tastes in fiction, and he found the I don't know, I think a kindred spirit in my book. And then we found, the book went out on submission, and it took a while, but we found a terrific publisher, Lanternfish Press, which is an indie publisher based in Philadelphia. And it's been terrific having them putting the book out. They run an absolutely wonderful press, and I feel taken care of. And it's just it's more than a joy to be able to publish this book. I just feel I'm very grateful for it.
Perseverance. It's amazing when we feel like we're at the end, we're standing at the edge of the cliff, looking down, thinking there's no way we can cross any further. And then the lifeline is there. But, that creativity doesn't leave us easily. And so anyway, I look forward to seeing your book in press, because it will be out very shortly. And I have a feeling that my son is going to love it. So it's going to be on the pre-order list for him. And anyway, Zachary Solomon, how could people get in touch with you?
Sure. I have a website. It's zachary-solomon.com. And I'm also on Instagram. What's my handle? At ZC Solomon, I think. Um, I'm online. Zachary C. Solomon in Google I will show up. Yeah, that's how you can get in touch with me.
All right, Zachary, are you ready to switch to our rapid fire questions?
Absolutely.
Would you rather swim with the sharks or the dolphins?
Sharks.
Oh, brutalistic all the way.
That's
And what is the most unique place you've ever visited?
an interesting question. Okay, rapid fire, right? So my gut reaction is the Lorry Caverns, which I went to with my dad on a road trip, 15 years ago or so, and they're just they're caverns, this magical place underground with stalagmites and stalactites and extreme darkness and it's a really beautiful haunting place, and that's the first thing that pops into my head.
Final question. Do you have a favorite schools out memory?
School out memory. Gosh. Okay, in the spirit of rapid fire, I'm going, stream of consciousness. I'm not sure. This is a strange answer, I think, to this question, but there's one summer that I came home from college, and I was really dead set on teaching myself how to lucid dream because I was in love with a woman in college who actually, it turned out, had narcolepsy, and she would fall into these really intense sleeps where she would lucid dream, and I thought, well, the best way to get her to fall in love with me would be to teach myself how to lucid dream, which is so ludicrous. But I set out on this mission to do it over the summer, and I bought books, and I spent each night trying to do it by reading these guides and these manuals, and I failed, never did it, still haven't done it. And you know what? She never fell in love with me, so there you go.
Well, I think your life turned out just fine without her, so we're going to go with that. And the most precious little girl that you've got beside you and the one that's on the way.
Exactly.
Zachary C. Solomon, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you so much, Alison. I really appreciate the opportunity. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
You have been listening to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. Alison out. Boom! We're all done. Zachary C. Solomon is from Miami, Florida. He received an MFA from Brooklyn College, where he is a Truman Capote Fellow. He lives with his wife, the novelist Mandy Berman, and their daughter in New York's Hudson Valley. For more information about Zachary, visit his webpage at Zachary-Solomon. For more information about the Florida Writers Association, visit us at floridawriters.org. Until next time.